Ladies and gentlemen, after that wonderful speech by His Excellency, we have a tremendous speaker in our presence, Dr. Palanivel Thiaga Rajan, who is the Minister for Information Technology and Digital Services in Tamil Nadu. Has a fascinating background, fourth-generation politician, studied in the US, investment banker, politician, was also Minister of Finance and Human Resources in Tamil Nadu, occupying all the important portfolios that was there, speaks with rare candor, vision, and we're hoping he would, I'm sure, not just hoping, will do the same. The reason we have this time in India Today Conclave focused on the states is because we think that it is where the states are really where the nuts and bolts of investments happen, of projects happen. And to start with that, let's begin with looking at the area that you are focusing, Minister, is digital governance. What has Tamil Nadu to showcase for UAE, and what do you expect from UAE to come in?
Well, first, thank you for inviting me. Thank you for the very kind introduction. Good morning to everybody. I see some of my old friends from the banking community here, so it's good to be back. I would say we have a lot to learn from the UAE. I think they have applied technology particularly in the functioning of government and in the citizen government connect, whether it is, or even visitor government connect. You know, now it's almost all auto scanning of the passports, right? Much
Correct.
faster.
Yeah, we saw that when we...
Yeah, we all came in that way. So I think the UAE has taken, in some sense, innovative, but at least adopted the world's best standards. The one that I like a lot is this single sign-on, where there's a UAE pass kind of sign-on, and 100% of all the government services are through that portal. And what it gives you is, for the citizen, just one, with the two-factor authentication, just one login and one access. And for the government, very good security, both data security, cyber security, because you only got one portal coming in. So these kinds of initiatives, I think, are at least world-class, if not world-leading. And so we have a lot to learn from them. In Tamil Nadu, I would say we have two probably unique things from a digital governance perspective. One is just scale. We are somewhere around 80 million citizens. And so getting all of them into the system first and getting it in an integrated way. On the one hand, you don't want to breach privacy, but on the other hand, the efficiency of government programs, of government spending, we're a welfare state, we do a lot of public distribution for various things, for scholarships, for food, for other benefits. Now we do a monthly to all women payment. So all these, technology can help a lot, and we have applied that. And the second I would say is that, because of the nature of our workforce, we are kind of the unspoken hidden giant in the IT sector. We used to be the open giant till about the year 2000. And then places like Bangalore, Hyderabad, to some extent, Pune, greater capital region, started investing aggressively and accelerating. But Tamil Nadu still has tens and tens of global companies with thousands of employees each, particularly in the financial services sector. And because of that ecosystem, we are growing a lot in the fintech and payments and the kind of finance-related technology space. So I would say those are areas where we're probably adjusted for scale because of being such a large population. We are of global impact. Yeah.
Tamil Nadu is the second largest state in terms of economy in the country. Maharashtra, of course, leads in it. And the fact that I come from Karnataka, so in terms of IT, information technology, and I grew up in Bangalore, that sort of dominated the scene. If Tamil Nadu now has to move in to the newer area that is there, what is the kind of initiatives you're taking to ensure that you all move into the lead or on par with the rest? And what, in that respect, connecting with UAE, you require in terms of investments and entrepreneurship?
Yeah, I think, we always learn from looking back at history. So I think if you go back to like 2000, as I said, Tamil Nadu, Chennai was in a dominant position. and other states not so much. In the last 20, 25 years, Bangalore, Hyderabad accelerated greatly through much better investment and much more attraction. So effectively, we didn't do 2 or 3 things very well. We didn't market properly. We didn't build quality of life infrastructure. I'm not talking about roads and airports. We got that at least as much as any other place. But we didn't build like the social networks. We didn't focus on kind of the, the ease of living or the ease of transitioning. And so if you look at, just as one data point, if you look at the workforce in the IT sector in Tamil Nadu, it's probably 85% local. Nowhere else in India is that true. Not in Bangalore, not in Hyderabad, not anywhere. In fact, I would say 15, 20%, maybe 20, 25% of the Bangalore IT workforce is Tamil, right? So that tells you something else. I'll go back to the strengths. But I think marketing, better kind of, company to government relations, more attractive incentives, more kind of focus on the soft aspects. These kinds of things we have not done as well. Despite that, we have grown quite a lot, which is to say that we have some advantages. The number one of which is that our human capital story is probably second to none. Maybe a slight second to Kerala, but then Kerala has got very much less business conducive environment than us.
That's true.
So Kerala ends up being mostly a talent exporter, whereas Tamil Nadu does some talent export, but also a lot of actual investment attraction. So the greatest strength for us is that we have almost universal education all the way to high school. Something like 88, 89, 90% of girls graduate high school. That's a very high number. Nowhere else, I mean, with the exception of small states like Kerala, maybe Northeast. And so we have a workforce that is second to none, scale and qualification. Then we have, a relatively developed state, as you say, second biggest economy, only about 5% of the population, 5.8% of the population, almost 10% of the GDP. So we have good roads, we have lots of airports, we have lots of international airports, we have ports, we have connectivity, highways and all that are probably, very good. So it's easier for people to come and set up and do business in Tamil Nadu than it is in many other places. So the combination of the human capital, the good infrastructure. Now we are doubling up on those things. We are laying this along the BharatNet program, but we have taken a different approach in Tamil Nadu. All the urban areas are already hugely covered by broadband fiber, right? Like in Chennai, when I came back as an expat, let's say 20 years ago, you could, in some areas of Chennai, you could get like a 1 Mbps telephone line, right? Cable. Now you can get in Chennai probably 3 vendors offering 300 Mbps on fiber in most parts of Chennai. So the city is already covered. Now we're laying the fiber to the villages. So by this year, it's already delayed for various reasons, but by this year, we'll connect 12,650 gram panchayats across the state with a 1 gig backbone fiber with about 300 and something block connections where we'll run the ONT. So it's going to be equitable access, because these days access to the internet is almost social justice for 2 reasons. One is the amount of educational content that's on there, particularly video content, which is very effective in people learning by themselves, is so large that not having access is a debilitating limitation. And the second is that work from home or work from close to home is a model that has caught on in a big way after COVID, after the pandemic. And so giving people access to work from home or close to home, I think, is also both productivity enhancing, life quality enhancing, and socially equitable. So I think we're laying the infrastructure, we're improving the government's platforms. We are moving, like UAE, to a largely online interaction. Hundreds of services we keep on adding that you can do from the comfort of your home online, or worst case, you go to a government, franchised e-service center. And we've, in my time, we have expanded that from about 7,000 or 8,000 centers to almost 30,000 centers, so that nowhere in the state should you have to travel more than a kilometer or 2 to access all the government services. And as you know, doing it faceless brings a lot of other advantages. When you have to see an officer of the state, it brings a lot of friction costs. So we're hoping to eliminate that also.
So if you take the fact that we are in the investment capital in some senses of this region, what is it that you would want any entrepreneur coming in from UAE or the investor to do? Is it which areas you think holds the biggest promise in the area that you're handling? And, and what is the kind of
beyond the areas that I'm handling, I think, there's a significant Tamil expatriate population here, entrepreneurs, professionals. Of the CFO statistic that was cited earlier, I think significant number of them are Tamil as well. So, though we're not quite as proportionally represented as, let's say, Kerala, there's a significant Tamil presence here of especially professional talent. In the flip side, I think the great thing about Tamil Nadu is this relative equity even in the entrepreneurial space. That is to say, the number of enterprises, the number of manufacturing companies, the number of factories. Any way you look at it, we have a lot of MSMEs that actually provide better employment and more equitable access. In some measure, I would say philosophically, the quality of a democracy is seen by the extent of the middle class, the middle scale industries. The more of those there are, the more it's an equitable democracy. In that sense, I would say Tamil Nadu is far different than, let's say, Gujarat, which has roughly the same per capita GDP, which has seen huge acceleration. But from an equitable outcome perspective, is a very, very, very different kind of growth. So our growth actually, I think, is conducive to investors, to finding the right kind of talent at all scales, 50 people, 100 people, 200 people. You don't have to be, the biggest multi-hundred, whatever, million or multi-billion dollar company. So Tamil Nadu, I think, is a very attractive destination for these kinds of SME links.
And are there any special incentives that you're offering?
Yeah, we do offer a lot of incentives, but if you look at it proportionally, it's something that's been on my mind for a while, ever since I was in finance. As a proportion of either our budget or relative to the allocations in places like Karnataka, especially Andhra, Telangana, we don't do that much. Not because of, we rarely turn down anybody. Somebody comes to us, we process them. Of course, like all government, I'd like to say we should do better, faster, less red tape, more efficiency in throughput. But right now, I don't think it's a question of denying anybody. On the other hand, it seems like, at least in my sector, the overwhelming majority of people who come and set up in Tamil Nadu, particularly in Chennai, don't even come to us. Either we've made the ease of doing business relatively good, and or the talent is so attractive that for the most part, they just come and set up on their own. If you go and do the math, I don't want to reveal too much here, but if you go and look at the budget numbers for allocations for the industries department or the IT department, we are growing without having to do that much. But we have policies. We keep on putting out new policies, incentive policies. I mean, there are two types of policies, right? Regulatory, incentive.
Right.
We keep publishing in our 4 years in government, we probably put out 15 or 18 incentive policies for GCCs, for R&D centers, for space manufacturing, for sectors, which we think are attractive. But it takes a while to process those, and many people come and set up without those. So that's a very interesting pattern we have.
But take a look at the fact, we are sitting in UAE, it's a federation, and the way the various components of that federation support the UAE. Take a look at India. What can we be doing? How supportive does the union need to do? Are we in the right direction in terms of it, or are we just competing within ourselves and really not leveraging India?
It's a very touchy question. I would say there are two broad themes you should think about, and at least I think about. The first is that we have great disparity between the north and the south. And let's leave the west and the east out for a second. Just look at the plain north and the south. If you look at the north and the south, in every way, from education levels to health access to social development to equitable outcomes to economic activity to per capita, forget that, to birth rates, to fertility levels, any of this, there's a big gap. It's not healthy for any country. And this is not a problem that's solvable by money. Because over the last 25 years, as I pointed out to successive finance commissions and their chairman, the net transfers financially going from the well-to-do states to the less well-off states has been only increasing, hugely increasing. And yet the gap keeps widening. In fact, the gap keeps accelerating between the outcomes. So something is profoundly wrong, and I've said it before, I'll say it again. The future of India only on the margin is going to be determined by how well Tamil Nadu does or Karnataka does or any of the southern states do. It's going to be largely determined by how we can bring the weighted average education levels, health levels, equitable access levels up in the most populous parts of the country, in the UPs, Bihars, Madhya Pradeshes of the world, which have, collectively, 500 million people or more. So I think that's something we need to think a lot about as a country. Something is not going right and needs to be fixed. At a different level, I would say we are in a very profound global shift in my understanding. And maybe I'm seeing it only from India, but UAE is in some sense the center of the world, the capital of capital, as they said about Abu Dhabi. But I think the post-war era, this notion of Bretton Woods, dollar as the basis for all trade, US as the kind of policeman, protector, savior of the world, NATO, UN, any number of alliances. I think that model is breaking down. I think His Excellency spoke in the morning, made a very telling point. He says, not everything should be about the US. We should also, and that's happening. Well, while I was at Stanchart, we issued the first offshore renminbi, so-called dim sum bond. And since then, there's many like it. Then there's, other, what they call masala bonds and all. So I think the notion of global capital independent of the dollar is starting to increase. It's only going one direction. Maybe it's not yet caught that inflection point of really becoming a full alternative. But so what I'm trying to say overall is the capital markets, the trade flows, the migration flows, all of these are under profound change and have been greatly accelerated in the last 3-4 months. And you've seen political outcomes, election outcomes, sometimes called early election in this era of the US administration, giving very different results than what one would have predicted. So I think it's safe to say we don't know how fast and what the end will be, but we are at an inflection point. The world order is changing. In that context, I think India has a huge opportunity, not least because we are roughly, depending on your perspective for the next 20 years, roughly about a quarter of the working age human population of the world is going to be Indian. Already the Indian kind of human capital powers lots of economies. You look around the world, you look at UAE, you look at Singapore, you look at the US, you look, anywhere. But I'm saying it's going to become much more so, both ways, both in terms of investment coming into India to get things done and to access the Indian market, also to continue to do things for the outside. So in this era, when we have this opportunity of a 20-year equivalent of what the 1990s to 2010s was to China, the compound growth rate of 10% a year for 20, 30 years profoundly changes the world, changes the country, changes lives. That, I think we could do a lot better if the union and the states work together. Because the union is really only a kind of policy setter, framework developer, they do like the pact that was announced today, talked about today. And the UK Free Trade Agreement, and there's that. They can set policies, they can create incentives, they can give tax breaks, they can do all these things. After that, the action has to happen at the states. And in fact, at the companies, but also incentivized much more so at the states because land is a state issue, labor is a state issue. All the things that actually need to be developed for productivity are state issues. So in that sense, I think, I've said it before, I think it would be really, really much more like a multiplier effect were the union and the states, irrespective of political parties of governments. The fact is many of the states are, not all, but many are run by regional parties or at least regional party coalitions. They're only that state. So the union is different. But, politics is politics. Growth is growth. We shouldn't have to worry about politics in the middle of focusing on growth. And I think there could be a lot better approach, and we could learn a lot from the UAE in that sense, how the Emirates work together with the presidency.
So you're essentially saying brand India needs to be projected with all the strengths of the states rather than individually competing with each other and not really cohesively taking the opportunities.
I'm not worried about competition. I'm not worried about level playing field competition. I'm not worried about whether Karnataka or Tamil Nadu will get the factory. If that's the case, that we can live with. There's enough opportunity for all of us. The scale of the global shift is unimaginable, right? Just imagine what happens if 5 or 10% of the capital that has been going into China now looking for new homes. There's only so much you can put into Vietnam, and maybe Indonesia is a bit bigger, but it has its own limitations. So you're going to have to need something of the scale of India, and if you do it right, there's more than enough opportunity for everybody. I'm not worried about competition between states. I'm worried about two things. I'm worried about the cooperation between the union government and the state governments, all state governments.
Right.
In particular, the non-ruling party state governments. But more, I'm worried about this kind of directed traffic from Delhi. It says, you shall go to GIFT City. This factory shall go to that state. This kind of directed traffic with incentives matched is a very inefficient outcome. A lot of people will go and find that, and I mean, as many bankers will say, the cost of capital or the marginal incentive is not going to be a profound thing. If you have a good business environment, you have a good platform, you have a good market, you have good talent, incentives are an icing. You can't win or lose trades just on incentives, right? Not for long anyway. So I think in that sense, if it was more integrated, states and union together, and it was more equitable, level playing field, everybody try to do your best, whoever wins, wins. Then I think we'll find a natural equilibrium. For example, a lot of things in Bangalore are now reaching kind of
saturation.
Yeah, I mean, you know.
Yeah.
So I think the market will find its own level, right? We are not worried about that competition. But we could do a lot better working together than, they set policy independently, then, we have to ask for permission even to go market. It's a very disjointed, in some ways counterproductive model. In other ways, just an efficient model. In some ways, actually counterproductive model the way we have now. That could be improved a lot.
Excellent point. I mean, the reform required is there, really, to transform all that. Coming to an area of AI, and that is now dominating our lives, and everybody talks excitedly about it. You are the minister there. How do you see the potential of AI? Where can we leverage our strengths? The world leaders are elsewhere. We need to build that leadership. We had a leadership in IT services. Where can India get to the cutting edge, and how does your state or any other state work its way up?
Yeah, I think we're still in the early stages of this iteration of AI. And what I would say because of my age and how many, I lived 20 years in the US, I would say what makes this iteration different than the previous iterations is just that the almost infinite capacity to generate data, to store data, to analyze it, and even for a startup to access the equivalent of hundreds of millions of dollars worth of computing power for 2 hours or for 6 hours because of the cloud and on demand. That's what makes this a different era. That means anybody with a good idea can get access if they have the right database. So I think the sheer volume of data and the possibilities that it unleashes when you have access to high levels of computing power for short durations on demand, that's what makes this different. But having said that, this notion that somehow kind of generative AI at a broader general intelligence level is upon us, I don't agree. I see so many mistakes, so many hallucinations, so many misdirected attempts. So I think it's clearly the inflection point, but we have some time to go in my view. And what is it that's going to change, I think, is that over time, all this data is going to have to be parsed, tagged. So I just went and opened up, inaugurated a startup that works for a lot of these self-driving cars in Coimbatore about 3 months back. It is mind-boggling the amount of annotation and tagging and image fragmenting that human beings have to do in order to train the machine for it to understand every possibility of a construction site and an accident site and a bad weather site, and it's just, so there's a lot of human work involved in actually getting the machine. When it gets there, it'll do all of the work, but till then it's probably a decade or so in this particular case. But I'm saying that in every case there'll be some of that. So I think the smaller language models, more custom focus, write code, for example, in this, these things are going to be upon us much faster.
Mm-hmm.
The broader kind of universal models are going to be a lot of time in the coming. But what is more important to me, I think, and in our state, is that we should really rethink what is it that makes a human being different than just high capability processor with infinite data. And how should we be changing the nature of education down from primary up? Till now we were training people to do jobs. And that's basically the intent. If you think about it, the nature of education changed pretty dramatically. Let's say till the 18th, 19th centuries. It was very rare opportunity only to the privileged. And the notion of education was not because you would go and become a, X or Y professional, but it was to make a person cultured, erudite, thoughtful, kind of urbane, humane. And then when we made it equitable and accessible to all, we started saying, okay, now let's start shaping them. You're going to be an engineer, you're going to be a chartered accountant, you're going to be a lawyer, you're going to be... So we were basically creating expertise. And we started that fairly early, right? You have to start choosing subjects by like 9th grade or something like that. And especially relative to my time in school, we dropped a lot of the core humanities subjects. We dropped the notion of civics.
Right.
We did all these things that when I go out to to my electorate, nobody has an idea what is the job of a local body elected representative relative to a MLA, relative to an MP, and what gets decided. These things are all gone from the curriculum. As a society, we're poorer for it. So I'm saying, so all those things, I think some of those are going to have to come back, right? Because if it's just analyzable or looking at data, then sooner or later, some AI kind of engine will do it better than 99.99% of human beings, or better than 100% of human beings. Like I went and opened another AI startup in radiology. It's an Australian company, set up an office in Chennai. For now, they do only two things: chest X-rays and brain CT scans. These engines, because they've been trained on the entire database of all scans of all people for like 20 years or something in Australia, these engines are far superior to any doctor. Because the engines can do 2-3 things that no human being is doing. It can look at this and 50 or 500 or 5,000 cases like it and start taking the diagnoses of that and starting to project it onto this.
Right.
Instead of just the reference that the physician asked for, it can look for patterns beyond what the physician asked for to see. It can look at a longitudinal study of this patient and say, what were the last 6 X-rays like and what does this say now? No doctor has all that in his head or her head. So at some level, these machines can do things fundamentally better because they have no limitation. So what does that mean now? Of course, regulatorily, I can't afford the machine to be a diagnoser because who's accountable if it makes a bad diagnosis? I have to have a licensed radiologist actually sign off on this still. Now what does that mean? How should we be training the radiologist? Because if the machine can do all this, what is it that the radiologist is going to be expert at?
Right.
So I think these kinds of things, all the way from there to the bottom of education, we need to start rethinking. We are working with some of the majors, with Google, with Microsoft, etc., at the school education level itself. But we need to do a lot more, and then it'll also require retraining of the teachers. Right? Because they're used to this kind of, relatively speaking, rote learning, regurgitation kind of education. So I think that's where the biggest need is, in my view.
It's interesting that you say that because if you look at technology, say the cell phone that we all hold, right? That's been the great leveler. All of us use it. You've seen how it is adapted in rural areas. Everyone's become their own bosses on that. Take a look at AI and the advancements that is happening in the digital phase. And you're now mentioning that even urban individuals who are studying here could be somewhat deficient in understanding this because our skill levels are not keeping in touch with it. If you had to, we talked of a tech divide, bridging that divide between rural and urban. And much of your services, as you mentioned earlier, was Panchayat. Where can we leverage these kinds of technology to start bridging that divide, to force multiply like a cell phone has done?
I think, again, I'll break that into two different questions. The first question is, of course, the cell phone and before that, the graphical user interface in general was a great leveler, because in my time, you needed to know how to program a computer before you could use it. Now anybody gets a phone can figure out how to use it, right? In that sense, the internet is a great leveler, because otherwise you had to go pay thousands or hundreds of thousands of dollars to get a PhD from someplace. Now there's, that information is available for free. So technology has been a great leveler in many ways. I think AI will be a great leveler as well, because I think if the machine can do a lot of the programming and interpretation, then I don't need to be so sophisticated, so specialist in computer science. In fact, the big skill now is going to be language and logic and reasoning and more kind of profound, what can I say, understanding of things like biology and chemistry rather than very specialized knowledge. But the flip side of that, I think, is in the field of education, actually AI can be hugely helpful. We have seen so many studies. Teachers are not particularly consistent when grading, when evaluating, and they are not particularly memoryful when kind of trying to mentor a student. They don't always remember the last 3 attempts of the same student for every student, especially if the student-teacher ratio is very different. So I've seen some papers, and it's a very touchy subject because, teachers are very strong unions. But I've seen a lot of, I've seen 2 or 3 papers where there's a huge improvement in learning outcomes, where AI engines are actually working with a very limited set of people, let's say 50 people or 100 people over 2 years. Afford anything else but go to government school could be very, very positive, very impactful. I hope that we started to look at some of that. I hope we'll do more of it.
And finally, we've got about a couple of minutes. Let's look at digital governance in, say, a state like Tamil Nadu, the use of AI, and how will it begin? Like we've seen the cell phone transform our lives and the way we do things. How do you leverage that in terms of our development? Because we do have still 60 to 70% of the population, it needs this kind of thing, but how do we transform their lives with it?
Yeah, I think in 2 ways. The first, I think all governments in most large democracies, take the US, take the UK, take India, we have not kept up with the demands of day-to-day administration. That is, over the decades, the complexity, the scale of actually running good governance has grown possibly exponentially. And either in staffing or in investment, most governments have not kept up. The platforms are not like, having come from the banking space, my bank had 10 times better IT platform in every way, from HR to operations to ERP to finance, than the government does, right? So this is common, I think, across a lot of governments, because by nature, in a democracy, politics is a very competitive business, but all governments are monopolies, right? You can only have one government. So there's not really that much incentive to do it much better, unless you have a very clear link between this period's governance and next period's election outcome, and that is increasingly fraying, even assuming it was good once, it's fraying with the advent of social media and money and things like that. So what we have, I think, first is the opportunity to massively apply technology to greatly improve the efficiency of administration, the functioning of administration, the efficiency of spending. I said when I came in as finance minister that for every rupee I spend, I'm not sure whether I'm getting 60 or 70 or 75 paisa of benefit. I don't know how much the leakage is. I don't know what the inefficiency. So those kinds of things I think we can do a lot better And we have, in the last 4 years in our government, we have done significantly well.
In fact, you have something that Tamil Nadu digital transformation.
From the beginning, from the first time, I probably did more of it when I was Minister for Finance and Human Resources than I am now Minister of IT, though the entity operates under me. It's called the Tamil Nadu e-Governance. Right. No, that's a policy, but the agency is called the Tamil Nadu e-Governance Agency.
Right.
And that's where we first integrated all the databases from public distribution system to driving license to land records to beneficiary payments to school records and to university records. We started getting a picture of who's who, what benefits are they entitled to, are they getting it, are they actually, we found a lot of people who are getting like pensions who are not alive, they were in the death register. And so, once you start having this, you can greatly increase the efficiency of spend. And what I'm very proud about now that I'm in this department, we have all these new programs to increase the attendance rate of government school children in colleges. Though Tamil Nadu has the highest ratio, we have roughly 50% of every graduating high school student goes to college, to a higher education. Wow. It's like double the national average. That's the goal of this NEP 2020, but we've already achieved it. Right. But there was wide disparity in that. We found that girls from government schools were not actually going because of financial limitations. So anyway, we did a bunch of programs. Again, I announced that when I was finance minister. But what we do now, because we have the records, we know ahead of time which girl going to college is eligible for the scholarship payment, and we notify her.
Wow.
You are going to be eligible for the scholarship payment. When you enroll in a college, we will know that you have enrolled in a college and we'll send you the payment automatically. So all these have basically greatly improved both equitable access, because otherwise you had to go put some paper, some human being had to say it's okay, then they had to give you a certificate. So now the system knows already. Of course, the system may not be perfect. Then you can come and ask for recourse. But for the overwhelming majority, for lakhs and lakhs of students every month, and for something like 1.1, so like 11 million something women every month. These payments are done automatically through the computer, through a payment gateway, without anybody having to do any additional work, right? So from special cases like pension validation that you're still alive, to scholarships, to these relatively universal schemes, the technology, the cell phone, the payment gateways have greatly made it more equitable, more efficient, and more robust. And I think this is just the beginning. I think there's a lot more we can do like that.
And finally, in the 2 minutes we have, if you had to tell the UAE investor about Tamil Nadu, 3 things that you would say, come, what would it be?
I think it's a place where doing business is relatively easy. We've always had a global mindset, going back thousands of years, or maybe 2,000 years. The logic of Yadum Ure Yavarum Kelir, all towns are our town, all people are our people. So we have a very open mindset. We have a very global diaspora and network. A lot of people who come back are our diaspora setting up companies. We have unparalleled talent pool. I think it's safe to say of the scale that we have, there's no other place in the world where you'll find this many qualified people of young age as a talent pool. And I would say that, with the global shifts, as we're seeing the shift away from China, at best, de-risking future investments and if possibly more moving away. For example, Tamil Nadu has become #1 in electronics goods export in 3 years from #4.
That's true. That's true.
A lot of it actually is iPhone assembly, which shifted from China and is now being done in Tamil Nadu in large factories by the Taiwanese contractors. So I think the ecosystem is there in electronics, in automotive. We have big intellectual capital every year for the last 6 years. The most number of patent registrations has happened in Chennai. So we have a good ecosystem of industry and suppliers and up and down the spectrum. So it's easier to fit in, and we have at all scales from 50%, 100% small enterprises all the way to, I think, Hyundai's second biggest production center is in Chennai after their hometown in South Korea. So I think in that sense, it's a very conducive place for investment, and we're very happy to work with global investors, global companies for mutual benefit.
Ladies and gentlemen, let's give him a very warm round of applause. Palanivel Thiaga Rajan, Doctor, erudite, informative, and as usual, always entertaining to listen to. Thank you very much, sir. Thank you.